Hello, everyone. My name is Moshe Nave from the SAP Community team. Welcome to today's SAP Community Call about OData Service Development Options. Be prepared for the ABAP RESTful Programming Model. We have Andre Fischer, who is a product manager for SAP Gateway and SAP Cloud Platform ABAP environment. Some housekeeping. So as you can see in your panel, in case you have a question, please raise your hand and then I'll see it. That's one option. You also have the Q&A interface. And then once you click on the Q&A, I'll get a notification and I'll address it to Andre. So I think we are ready to start. Andre, please take it away.
Yeah, thank you very much, Moshe, for this nice introduction. So, as you heard, my name is Andre Fischer and working as a product manager for the SAP Cloud Platform ABAP environment and SAP Gateway. So, the old way to program OData services and also the new way. So in our today's talk, I will have the following agenda. I will start with the development options for development of OData version 2 services. Then I will explain the ABAP RESTful Programming Model, the latest ABAP programming model which is available now. Then we will talk about OData version 4, so when it can be used and how it can be used. And we will finish with a summary where it is safe to invest now. So that means if you are on an older release, what you should do or what can you do right now if you develop OData services so that your investments will be saved in later releases. Okay, let's start with the OData development options. OData version 2 development is already out quite a while. And the first way how to build OData services for OData version 2 is using code-based development using the service builder. So here it's indicated by this numbers. We have code-based implementation in the service builder. So you implement the methods and you either call classic business logic such as BAPIs or classes, and you also access classic data tables to retrieve the data. So this kind of service development means that you are going to do a code-based implementation of the CRUD queue methods. So for each entity set in an OData service, in the service builder, SEGW, 5 methods are generated. A create method, a read method for a single read, a query to retrieve a list of items, an update method to perform an update of an entity, and a delete method that can be used to delete the entity. You see it here on the right side. You have a UI. And there you can navigate then to ABAP Workbench, and then you are going to implement entity set specific methods, and you're implementing the OData version 2 API. So this is available as of Gateway 2.0 that can be done even with NetWeaver 7.0, so very old releases. And it's also in newer releases, we come to that with the next slide, still necessary for certain advanced scenarios like offline scenarios where you determine so-called delta token. So if you do a second call with a delta token, you will retrieve the newly created items, the changed items, and the deleted items. Or if you have complex transactional behavior. So, and very important to say, if you have built such a service, it will continue to run also in newer releases, so even in S/4HANA. However, later on we will see that it will continue to run, but you will not be able to immediately leverage features like OData version 4 out of the box here. So then the next step in this evolution of the OData service development is the use of so-called referenced and mapped data source approach. Still, we are using the service builder, but now we are building CDS views on top of DDIC tables, and the SADL query engine is generating all the read access to the data. So here we see for the first time that the implementation, so where you do actually the implementation of the business logic, moves partly to the creation of CDS views. While for create, update, and delete calls, you still have to implement the methods in the service builder. So how does it look like if you have the service builder? You have, first of all, the mapped data source approach. Here you are creating the model in SCGW similar to code-based implementation. You do a DDIC import, but then you can do a mapping on entity set level, and there you map the CDS views and maybe associations between different CDS views here. It's available as of 740, and one drawback is if you add a new field to such an entity, it's not automatically included, so you have to do something in the service builder. And as I said, code-based implementation is still necessary for create, update, and delete methods. With the next NetWeaver version, that is 750, the referenced data source became available. And here it's a little bit easier for the developer. You just have to reference to a CDS view or several CDS views. And you see this type of dialog. So you right click on this, you add a data source reference, and then you can, on the right hand side, choose which CDS views are to be published. So you can also limit the number of, let's say, associations that are followed. And this is the way how you can then create OData services as of 750. New fields are automatically included in contrast to the mapped data source approach. Still, create, update, and delete methods are to be implemented in the respective methods generated by the service builder. Then, also with 750 for the first time, the ABAP programming model for SAP Fiori became available. And here, the implementation completely moves away from the OData-based APIs. So you're implementing CDS views, and you are implementing methods in BOPF objects, Business Object Processing Framework objects, that are generated based on certain annotations in the CDS view.
Andre?
Yeah?
Sorry for interrupting. We have a question coming from Florian Henninger.
Yeah, sure.
What happened when a reference data source of 7.40 gets an update later after upgrade to 7.50 plus?
Okay, so a mapped data source approach, a service that is built with mapped data source approach will continue to run. So there are certain examples, certain services in S/4HANA that are built based on this 740 approach, and they still run. So there is no need to do anything when upgrading to 750. It's just if you start with a new development, you would be able to leverage reference data source approach. So I would recommend to use the reference data source approach opposed to the map data source approach, because it's more cumbersome. Okay, so with the Fiori programming model, which is available for the first time in 750, you still can use the service builder as a, more or less as an ABAP exit if you publish the OData service that has been built based on the CDSU via reference data source approach, because here you can redefine certain methods in the model provider extension class or the data provider extension class if necessary. It's not recommended to do that, but depending on the backend release, especially if it's, let's say, 750, certain annotations cannot be maintained in the CDS view, and there it would be necessary to do that via ABAP code. So that's here the ABAP code that could potentially be added to certain methods in the service builder. So how does it look like? Now we see here that we are using ABAP in Eclipse. Okay, you need it anyway, ABAP in Eclipse, to create CDS views. And here we have the editor that is used to maintain those BOPF objects. So you, for example, you define whether a certain method is called during the creation or the update of an entity, and then you implement here those methods. And you see that these implementations are now not dependent on the OData APIs anymore, but you're just implementing business logic in the BOPF framework. So in 750, it became first available. That's Business Suite Enhancement Package 8. And with 751, which is beneath S4HANA 1610, for example, the draft became available. That means that you can create a business object, let's say like a sales order. You work on it, it will be automatically saved. And you can, even if you leave your computer, you can come back later on and continue to work with this. So it's some kind of stateful approach here that is available. Here, as I said, the code-based implementation, the ABAP code moves to the implementation of so-called determinations. So you determine something like the next free number of a sales for a sales order, or a validation. That means you validate what is calculated. For example, the number of items in a sales order must not be negative, or actions. Again, sales order example would be the approval of a sales order. We call this, and I also introduce it here because we use it later on in the ABAP RESTful Programming Model. This is so-called managed scenario. And managed means that the query engine, in this case SADL, does all the orchestration for the read and update and create methods calls to the Gateway framework. So the Gateway framework now moves more to a role. It's just the provider of the OData runtime, while the implementation is not now in APIs provided by SAP Gateway, but from BOPF objects. And for
Andre?
Yes?
Sorry for interrupting. We have another question. Just let me know
Sure.
when you're ready to get it.
Yeah, now?
Okay, cool. So Phil Colley is asking, from a 7.40 point of view, which method is faster at creating custom OData services? SEGW with structures, etc., or SCDS views?
Yeah, it's a question whether it's fast or not. It is more, let's say, future looking to use CDS views because, as I said, all the query options are automatically supported there. And as you will see later on, what you define as a CDS, you can later be reused in the ABAP RESTful Programming Model if you want to move to that new programming model later on. So there is more reuse. So the code-based implementation is still a valid one, and maybe you're not able to build CDSU for whatever reason, then you can go for that. And yeah, it's probably fast, and then it depends on what you can do best. Okay, let's move on. Now we come to the ABAP RESTful Programming Model. This programming model now first became available with the SAP Cloud Platform ABAP environment, and it's planned to become available for the first time for on-premise releases with the next version of S/4HANA 1909. So if we look here, we see this high-level overview or the big picture of this new programming model. So at the very heart of this new programming model, we still have the CDS views. So if you have a CDS view, you have done the data modeling there, a read-only service will automatically, can more or less be used automatically in this new programming model. So what you define, what you have to add then there is to create a new type of object, which is called service definition. A service definition is a new ABAP object where you define which part of the CDS views, if they are connected, for example, via associations, is to be published as part of your service. And then you create a so-called service binding, which binds the service to the OData protocol. As you can see, right now it's just OData version 2, but in OData version 4 will be supported in the future, and that means your implementation will not change. You just have to add an additional so-called service binding to publish this then via another OData version. And maybe potentially we will support other protocols in the future, and you would be able to leverage those protocols without the need to re-implement your service. And then if you then publish the service, we distinguish between so-called SAP Fiori UIs and web APIs. So for SAP Fiori UIs, the service will contain annotations, as you know them probably from normal CDS view development in 750 and 751. But we will also support so-called web APIs, which are more used for machine-to-machine communication that have less annotations. So especially no UI annotations, only those annotations that are necessary, for example, to define this is a currency or this is a unit of measure. In addition, you are going to implement so-called not a business objects. You won't find the business object as such in ABAP in Eclipse, but depending on how you define the data modeling in your CDS views, if you use additional keywords such as root, as I will show later on, this then you will generate appropriate objects that are needed for the create, update, and delete methods. You define this in the so-called behavior definition and implement the behavior. So whether the service supports create, update, delete, or actions in ABAP classes. So let's have
Andre, sorry for interrupting. We had another question.
Sure.
2 slides ago, it refers to 2 slides ago. There was a query engine next to CDS views and DB table. What is the significance of query engine? By Sumit Kumar Kundu.
You mean here, the query engine, this is the query engine is the technically here in this case, the SADL engine. So that's the abbreviation if you find it somewhere in the documentation. So it's an engine that we are delivering, it's a framework. And if an OData call comes in via the gateway framework, it is given in this case for such OData services that are based on CDS views and that are built on top of reference data sources or this OData publish true option, then the gateway framework gives the request to the query engine, in this case, the SADL engine. So I used here the term query engine and not specifically SADL because the the query engine that is maybe used, the exact implementation might change, but you don't have to bother here because you are just implementing your business logic here underneath. So you're not confronted with that.
And then we have another question. Latest ABAP programming model architecture, does service definition layer almost serve same purpose as in controlling the authorization, like done via CDS DSL checks by Navdeep Madan?
I will explain that later, so I will come to that.
Perfect. Thank you.
Good. So let's start with the CDS views. In what is their role in the new ABAP RESTful Programming Model. So here on the left-hand side, you see the source code for a CDS view, and you see a new keyword here, which is called define root view. And every business object has a root view, and from there you navigate to child views or maybe to a value help, and you have special associations which are called composition that are associations to child objects, and on the child object layer those associations are marked as association to parent. So these are different kind of associations opposed to simple value helps that are used in the UI. And by doing so, you can create complex business objects like sales order item, and schedule line item, and whatever. And everything, as you can see here, is defined in the CDS view. So your CDS view coding changes a little bit, but you have to, because you have to add those new ABAP keywords. Then the next thing you have to implement is the behavior definition language, the behavior definition. Here we use behavior definition language. For example, the first code says that we are dealing with a so-called unmanaged implementation. In this case, no runtime is taking care of all the things, but the developer has to take care about everything. So we have keywords like create, update, delete, and we have defined here an action. So this is a sample service based on the famous S-Flight example, and it's available in GitHub. And once you would have a system that supports the ABAP RESTful Programming Model, you can import it via GitHub, and there you will find this coding. And we can see here on the right-hand side in the Fiori Elements UI, an action which is called set to book, and a delete option and a plus sign that allows us to create new objects. And this is influenced by the definition in our behavior definition. In addition, we have keywords for that mark certain properties as read-only, that's the travel ID, and certain fields as mandatory. And as a result, they are marked in the Fiori Elements UI with this asterisk here, and as mandatory as usual in web UI. So it's the user knows that something has to be entered here, and if he forgets to enter something here, you won't be able to continue until you have filled in all the mandatory fields. So this is the implementation of our the definition of our behavior. And then it's this new type of object service definition. That was where the question was about. So we have a new folder called business services in ABAP in Eclipse, and then two subfolders called service bindings and service definition. And the service definition here is just a list of exposures which CDS views are exposed by this service. So it would, for example, allow you just to expose a subset, not everything from your complete business object, because you would, let's say, create a service for a certain user group that does not have to see all the entities, but just a subset of it.
Andre, we have another question. Do you want it now or?
Yeah.
Okay. What is the minimum ABAP or S/4HANA version which supports ABAP RESTful Programming Model?
Yeah, that is the that is the newest release. That would be the upcoming 1909, which will support the first version of the ABAP RESTful Programming Model, and it is already supported with ABAP. I call it ABAP in the cloud. So the official name is SAP Cloud Platform ABAP Environment. There it is already available since 1808. And there we will always have the newest version available. On-premise will follow in a yearly schedule. Okay, the service binding now, that's a very interesting part of the new programming model. You see here that we bind the service, and we can first select a binding type. So right now, it's just a way possible to select OData version 2 as the binding type, but it will then in the future also be a way possible to select OData version 4 as an additional binding type. And in OData version 2, you can right now distinguish between a UI binding type and a web API binding type. And here on the right-hand side, you see then the service details. So you see, for example, the service URL, and you see a nice button called Preview. And if I press that Preview button, SAP Fiori Elements application will be started for me as an ABAP developer. So the cool thing is now, you can very quickly test your service that you have built by just pressing this preview button, and then you see, oh, my service already delivers data. You can do some things like sorting, filtering, and stuff like that, which is all defined by the UI annotations and your behavior definition.
We have another question. Can we create multiple service definitions and share them with different subscribers for one implementation?
You can have several service definitions in the end using of the same CDS use. Yes, that is possible.
Okay, cool. Yes, a recording will be shared in the SAP Community Calls page. Tranvu Nguyen asked how to transit from ABAP for Fiori programming model to ABAP RESTful programming model.
That will be shown in a later slide.
Great. Another question is, ABAP RESTful programming model looks very much similar to SAP Cloud Platform Application Programming Model. Is it so? Does it has roots in SAP Cloud Application Programming Model or otherwise? Just want to know an inspiration behind this design architecture.
Now they have similarities, so both are using CDS use, but okay, the one CAP, so the Cloud Application Programming Model, is using JavaScript and Java for the implementation of business logic, while the ABAP RESTful Programming Model is using ABAP. There are also other certain differences which are caused by the let's say different runtimes that are used here. But basically, yes, there are great similarities in that. But you will probably, it will depend who is using what, whether your developers are more from the ABAP side or whether you have more resources in Java or JavaScript. Let me now continue with the explanation what a managed versus an unmanaged scenario is. So I already talked about the term managed previously when we were talking about BOPF objects that are generated in the ABAP Fiori programming model, which is available in 750 and 751. So we have now the ABAP programming model for SAP Fiori that generates those CDS views, and you're going to implement this. And this type of implementation can be used for so-called greenfield implementations. The greenfield implementation is an implementation where you more or less start from scratch with your business logic. So it's a new scenario. It's not leveraging existing APIs so that are already there. So this is supported by the ABAP Fiori programming model. This managed approach is not yet available, not yet supported with the ABAP RESTful Programming Model. It's planned. Here we just have the unmanaged use case that is supported. In this case, you can call existing APIs, but as a developer, you also have to take care about more things on your own. And you see here this not supported sign in the ABAP Fiori programming model, but with an asterisk. So it's not supported via BOPF, but you can use SCGW and the reference data source approach and add business logic in your data provider extension class. So this is, if we are talking about 750 or 751, also unmanaged scenarios are supported with CDS use, but it's not officially called the ABAP Fiori programming model. And then we have a third type. We call it managed with self-implemented safe. That means you want to leverage stuff like draft support for your application, but you have some existing business logic that, for example, creates a sales order. And but you can, let's say, you limit this just to calling this, and then you can leverage the framework support for all these things like draft and automatic save and stuff like that. But finally, you will then call your business logic to update and create something. This is planned to be supported with the ABAP RESTful programming model. It's not supported for BOPF objects. So that's, let's say, a drawback that cannot be done. Was not supported to do this with BOPF objects. So we look at this. So we have we have different phases here. We have an interaction phase where you modify, read, and lock your objects, and you have a save sequence where you have you finalize your data. Then you might do certain checks before save. Then adjust numbers is something for late numbering, where you would choose numbers for your newly created objects to guarantee that you have subsequent, so a continuous row of numbers, and then finally you have the save. And you are using a transactional buffer to have a communication between this interaction phase and the save sequence. And in an unmanaged case, you have to take care about all this yourself as an ABAP developer, while in the managed case, most of this is taken by the framework, and you're just doing implementations for the business logic. So I think it's better shown here. So in an unmanaged case, you have application already coding is available. This is then for the interaction phase. The transactional buffer is filled, and the save sequence then reads the data from this buffer. So it's decoupled from the UI technology, and examples are the sales order and the purchase order. Maybe a few of you have seen a first implementation of this for the sales order in a Fiori-like UI that was shown in the UR5 Con, I think 2 weeks ago. And here we have, let's say, wrapper code that is that is necessary to implement in the business logic. In the managed use case, so we have the managed runtime. This takes care of the transactional buffer. And here the implementation moves just to the implementation of this modify method in the interaction phase, or the finalize and check before save methods from the save sequence. So here is it's similar to what we see from BOPF, where you implement determinations, actions, and validations. So the same, let's say, if you have already implemented things there, and I will show it later on, there will be options to reuse that if you have an existing BOPF implementation, to use that later in a managed implementation for the ABAP RESTful Programming Model. So an example for such applications would be newly created applications that you develop in the cloud in SAP Cloud Platform ABAP environment. So then this third option, this managed with self-implemented save, that's also something which is planned. Here you might have a function module for update tasks, so that does everything for you to write down the data to the database. But for the handling of these modifications and the read and the logs and stuff like that, you would still have the implementation in similar to the pure managed use case, but only finally, if you save your data, you will send this data that is to be saved to your existing business logic. So that is something where you have maybe code which is available or in DynPros where such business logic comes from, and you would be able to reuse that here. In OData version 4, we can already now develop OData version 4, but here, similar to OData version 2, you just have the option to do code-based implementations by the APIs of the Gateway framework. But it's available as of 750 already, but it's not, I would say, really recommended. Why? Because you cannot reuse your implementation because it's, again, OData API specific, and the OData version 4 APIs have different signatures opposed to the OData version 2 APIs. So it will not be easily possible to reuse your implementations from an existing OData version 2 service for OData version 4. However, it's a way how you can build an OData version 4 service right now if it's absolutely mandatory. So if, for example, your business, implementation requires OData version 4 and you cannot wait for the ABAP RESTful Programming Model, which plans where OData version 4 is planned to be supported. And in this case, we also will support the managed as well as unmanaged scenarios. So the code here will be, again, in CDS view or the business object implementation for a managed use case, or in an unmanaged scenario where you have this custom implementation. Both will then later on support OData version 4 with an upcoming version. That comes now, we will thus come to the question where it is safe to invest now. So look at the evolution. So we started with 740 and 750. There you have the SEGW. You can use the modeled data source approach or the reference data source approach. So core data service you have built and you are calling classic APIs. So there we have a list of do's and don'ts and recommendations that I will show in a following slide. As of 750, the ABAP programming model for SAP Fiori became available. So for newly created scenarios, you can leverage BOPF objects that are generated based on the CDS view definition. This is the current best practice for building new applications in S/4HANA. And it's still the recommended approach until the ABAP RESTful Programming Model will support the managed use case. So in the ABAP RESTful Programming Model, we will not use SCGW anymore. Everything is Eclipse-based. So we are doing core data service development and the behavior definition, and this is the future direction for our data service development. And first versions, as I said, are available in ABAP, SAP Cloud Platform ABAP environment. And as I said, the model which is currently recommended to use BOPF objects that are generated based on CDS views in 750 and 751. These are safe investments because we plan for an integration so that you can move to this ABAP RESTful Programming Model if you have started to build with the ABAP programming model for SAP Fiori.
Andre, are you
yeah.
ready for another batch of questions, or you want to keep them to the end?
Maybe it's we are quite at the end, so maybe we'll move to the end. So okay, this is just I will not go through all these links here. So here we have listed links to documentation that describes how you can work with CDS views. For example, I've not elaborated here DCL. That means data control language that you can leverage here for reuse of authorization checks. And what you should not do, that's the recommend, you should not do implementations where the business logic is mixed with technical aspects. So if you're doing implementations, try to make sure to carve out the business logic into own classes so that you can later on, you are later on able to reuse that. And the benefits are that CDS views and data control language definitions can be leveraged later on in S/4HANA, and yeah, that will in the end lower also the implementation cost. The key takeaways are finally, so if you have not started already, you should get familiar with CDS views. And if you are creating OData services, the recommendation is to use CDS views as the data modeling language. So that means in 740 and 750, you might want to use mapped or reference data source approach, or in 750 or in 751. If it's a new scenario, you should have a look into a CDS BOPF integration scenario. And you could use the OData publish equals to true option, then you don't have to use the SCGW, but reference data source approach with the SCGW allows you to add some additional code on the ABAP layer. So therefore it's the most, or the recommended approach in OData service development in S/4HANA right now. You should make use of the programming model for SAP Fiori for new scenarios. So for the releases where it is available, that means 750 and later, that means enhancement package 8 or S/4HANA. And you should be prepared in a way that that you know how the programming model will evolve. And you should not go for OData version 4 right now with code-based implementation if it's not absolutely mandatory. So, because that will then be available in a future S/4HANA release and in the cloud. And then you would be able to leverage OData version 4 with your existing implementation without the need to re-implement your service. That would then be the Q&A.
Great, thank you, Andre. So first we have Chaitanya Moore asking, so the service binding feature has all the features from IWFND, main services in old way OData programming?
Yeah, it will automatically publish then a service in a system where you use local deployment. So where it publishes the service locally in your system. If you want to publish it, let's say in a hub-based scenario, you would still have to use the IW main service for version 2 or the V4 admin transactions for OData version 4.
Great, thank you. Now we have a question from Florian Henninger. Can I use the preview as delivered version when I don't want to change anything?
No, the preview, just the preview. So you would have to use, have maybe not elaborated enough on that. So it's just a preview. It's not really generating a SAP UI5 application that you can deploy. For this, you would have still to use the web IDE. It's just, it's just convenience for the ABAP developer. So it should make it easier for the ABAP developer to test it a little bit. But if you have more complex UI to implement, you have to do that via web IDE. And finally, publishing SAP UI5 application has to be done by web IDE as well.
Great, thank you. We have Jitendra Suni. What is another use of BOPF another than OData service?
Can I see? Maybe I can I see those chats here? No, I didn't understand the question. Maybe.
So if you, I will read it again. What is another use of BOPF another than OData service?
Okay, we would have to, let's say, discuss this then offline.
Okay, great. We have a question from Ashish Patil. As Fiori, yeah, go ahead.
Okay, BOPF supporting ABAP Cloud. Yeah, we'll see that. So the BOPF, maybe I see now the sorry, I wasn't able to see all these questions. So the question here with is from Sumit Kumar Kundu. So how can existing artifacts created by CDS BOPF RDS programming model can be migrated? So we are working on a, let's say, on a migration way, and that is something we will deliver. So it will require certain manual steps. So it's not totally automatic. So you just not press a button, but it will allow for a migration from a CDS BOPF-based scenario to this new ABAP RESTful Programming Model. In a single CDS with BOPF annotation, can we mention multiple tables? No. You have to create several CDS views, and each CDS view has to be a one-to-one relationship to the underlying table. Okay, the plan is there a plan for ABAP RESTful Programming Model for non-S4 systems? No. So the ABAP RESTful Programming Model will only be available for S/4HANA and for SAP Cloud Platform ABAP environment. Okay, BOPF approach supported in ABAP Cloud. No, you cannot use BOPF in ABAP Cloud. Okay, managed and unmanaged scenarios, I guess I have explained. I guess. Okay, the Fiori UI can be created using annotation. Will it replace custom UI5 app development? I would say no. So it's let's say the 80% case. So the Fiori programming model and using annotations there, it's quite nice. So you can generate it, you can do lots of things, but there might be certain use cases where where it's better to write an application from scratch. But the advantage is once you use those generated applications, they are easier to maintain. And still there will be options to enhance those via SCGW, so you can at least use them as a starting point. Okay, post operations. In the end, this is this behavior implementation that I was talking about. So if you would then you could call more or less the same BAPI in the end. And this is how you would also move from an existing code-based implementation to that. So you would have to implement the same interface as it is used in the ABAP RESTful Programming Model. So this is what I'm working on an example that shows how you should prepare your current implementation so that you can leverage it, the business logic at least, for this newly programming model. Okay. I guess. Okay, the question is whether you said, I said that the BOPF model is still preferred until the managed scenario becomes available. Will it become available for 1909 as well? No. So right now the plan is just to support unmanaged scenarios. So managed will first be available in an upcoming release of the SAP Cloud Platform ABAP environment. Still one open. Okay, from Mr. Röckerlein, so what the support time for all these variants? So all the variants are supported as long as the NetWeaver releases are supported, or the Gateway framework is supported for those frameworks. And question whether SAP provide a pilot platform to develop, test, and experience. So right now we are planning to have a trial system for ABAP, SAP Cloud Platform ABAP environment available. And this might be then, so not a pilot platform is maybe the wrong word. So a trial platform we are planning to make available. If you want to use it right now, you can already do so by getting your own instance of SAP Cloud Platform ABAP environment. So that was also the question here from, that means there is no, let's say, need to, let's say, to rewrite an application if you could still, the old code will continue to run, even in S/4HANA. I guess then we are done, or?
So we have one more question in the chat. I don't know if you saw it from Phil Comey or more statement. Would be great to see actual examples from moving to BAPI calls to something else in ABAP RESTful Programming Model.
Where is it?
In the chat, not in the Q&A section, but in the chat.
Where's the chat? Do I see it here?
Yeah, so you have it, just to take down your browser, the mouse cursor, and then you'll see it.
Yeah, we will work on those examples, definitely.
Great. And then just the next slide about the SAP community. Andre and I would like to invite you all to collaborate and ask questions and blog and get recognition about the topics that were discussed in the call. So we're looking forward to seeing you all there. We are at the top of the hour, so I want to thank Andre for this great session. A recording will be posted in the SAP Community Calls page. I hope that by today or tomorrow. And I look forward to seeing you all in the future SAP Community Calls. Thank you, everyone.